Hello, my name's Ed Poole and I'm a member of the Green Party. We have our autumn conference coming up, and today I'm speaking to Matthew Hull from the Green Party Trade Union Group, who's bringing two motions to conference. Hi, Matthew.
Hello, hello, hello. Nice to see you, Ed.
Am I right in thinking that these were put together by the Green Party Trade Union Group?
So the motions are proposed by me as an individual, but keen conference goers from the past few years will recognise the trade union strategy to win motion from two previous conferences, spring this year and autumn last year, during which they were supported by the Green Party Trade Union Group. Which has also been promoting that motion to its members. And the other motion, of course, seeks to push the party to campaign around the Green Party's Workers' Charter, which the Green Party Trade Union Group put together alongside various Green councillors, campaigners, MPs, and others, and which was published on May Day 2026.
So you mentioned there the motion, I think, is A96, the Workers' Charter. So as you said, the Workers' Charter was something that was launched by the kind of leadership of the party in May.
Mhm.
Um, and that kind of it seems to be highlighting kind of existing Green Party policies. What's the motion that goes to conference adding to that?
So the purpose of this motion is fundamentally to make the Workers' Charter and the Green Party's already really strong offerings on trade union rights and workers' rights more broadly, to take those and make them a real focus for our campaigning. For many years, the Green Party's had a really strong suite of policies in this area, one that we can always improve on, of course, but one which I think we don't often do enough to promote to the public and, of course, to the wider Labour movement. I think that's something that we need to change. And personally, and I know collectively in the trade union group as well, we see Green Party conference not only as a way, of course, of making really strong, powerful policy, but of course, giving the party leadership and its spokespeople the authority and indeed a kick up the backside occasionally to campaign really hard on specific issues. I think it's that campaigning focus which is currently missing from the Green Party's sort of workers' rights offering, and it's that we're hoping to inject by putting the Workers' Charter front and centre of the party's offering in the next year or so.
Sorry, just to follow up on that. In terms of on the ground, if you're in your local Green Party, how would that be kind of reflected if this it passes?
The important thing to say now, Ed, is that, of course, no motion to conference, however worded, whoever supports it, whoever votes for it, is going to make things happen on the ground by itself. The important thing is, of course, that following conferences vote for this and conferences authorization, people really take the baton and run with it. What this motion envisages and what you'll see in the text is a call to Green Party activists and campaigners up and down England and Wales, and whether they are councillors or not, and whatever role they play, to take up the Workers' Charter's goals and policy objectives and use those as a launch pad to build stronger relationships with trade unions and with workers in their local areas.
One of the things in the Workers' Charter that was mentioned was repealing all anti-trade union laws since 1979, I think it was. Um, and when this was announced by Zach and so on, I noticed quite a lot of pushback of people picking out kind of things that have been in anti-trade union laws that are like, well, what? So you want to bring back closed shops, or do you want to bring back? Um, so the policy is not really specific in terms of what counts as an anti-trade union law and what doesn't. What's your take on that?
My take is that the important thing for the party right now is to have a really clear agenda in terms of what's not working and what needs to be replaced. And I think what's important about the year 1979, of course, is that it's the year that Margaret Thatcher was first elected, the start of Thatcher's ministry. And I think it marked an acceleration in the rolling back of trade union rights across the UK. Of course, many of that meant that sort of rolling back process started much earlier, indeed during Ted Heath's ministry, and then later during subsequent Labour ministries as well, but accelerated under Margaret Thatcher. Of course, when it comes to repealing and replacing this legislation with a framework that respects and upholds workers' rights, I think it's beyond the scope of any conference motion, and indeed probably beyond the scope of any number of Green Party policy statements to cover off the sort of technical questions that that involves. I think what's important is that we articulate really clearly the kinds of rights that we anticipate being introduced. The Green Party has been very clear on other occasions, including in the 2024 general election manifesto, that we anticipate providing that workers can strike freely over matters of their own choosing, whether those are either narrowly trade disputes or over political objectives, such as, for instance, preventing one's employer from engaging with or trading with other companies that are supporting the crime of genocide in Palestine, for instance. So I think there are other ways that we can make really clear why we're doing this and what we want to empower workers to be able to do without necessarily getting into the sort of finer technical points of, which particular law is going to be altered in which particular way. Now, of
Mm.
course, we do at some point need to put a bit more meat on the bones, and I think that's why the charter is a really good sort of starting point on that. But it's something that I would anticipate Green Party spokespeople developing over the next year or so in conjunction with the trade union group.
Have you got a view on closed shops personally?
For closed shops, so my own personal view, I should stress, is that I think that the closed shop where it's negotiated by a independent trade union is defensible and should not be restrained or restricted by law. It's not the state's business to be intervening on that matter specifically. I should add that the Green Party's policies for a sustainable society currently stresses an opposition to the closed shop. And so that's the current Green Party platform and program. So if that's something that I wanted to change, I would need to address that specifically by changing Green Party policy.
One of the things that annoys me a bit in and has done for a few years is policies that call for a specific minimum wage and then go out of date quite quickly. And it always struck me that one of the things we should be doing is rather than pegging the minimum wage to, rather than having a specific minimum wage that is, particularly the inflation has been wild for the last few years, is we should peg it to something um, like a real living wage, for example. What's your thoughts on that?
So I think you make a really good point, Ed, in that these things are changing, and specifically in sort of high inflation environments when things are getting more expensive, the same sort of wage demand becomes worth less and less over time. And so you're absolutely right about that. In terms of the demand in the Workers' Charter, which is for £15 by the end of April 2027, I think what's important to note here is that there is currently no mainstream political force which is demanding even that at the moment. And so, even that, as the Green Party's demand, would make the party more ambitious in the short term than any other in the mainstream political landscape. But it's important to stress that that's not the end of the story. Life will continue, God willing, following April 2027, and that's not the end of the story as far as our movement or our party is concerned. And so I would anticipate, subsequent demands to raise that higher and higher to put more money in workers' pockets. More specifically to the point you raised about whether we should sort of peg these things to the sort of cost of living in some way, perhaps take a basket of goods and services that workers buy and make sure that wages and wage floors are sort of raised in tandem with that. That's something that I would definitely support having a Green Party-led government doing. I think it's a practice that governments should be engaging in. What I wouldn't necessarily do is hold our movement or our party's demands to that. I think we should be not only seeking to sort of keep up with the cost of living, but ultimately we should be trying to increase Labour's share of income more broadly. And that's going to involve going above and beyond the rate of inflation, above and beyond that sort of like pegging and indexing process. And it's going to involve making militant demands from a trade union perspective.
The other proposal I want to talk about, the other one that bring to conference is A94. This is trade union strategy to win. And this is to incorporate trade union work into party strategy and operations. Can you say a bit about that, please?
Speaking, I think, from my own perspective as someone who has been involved in the party for a while now, who has been involved in the trade union group for quite a long time, but who's also been involved in the party structures, having sat on the Green Party Executive Committee for 3 years. I think what's missing from the party's work with trade unions is an impulse at the centre of the party, and in particular from the executive and the Green Party Council, to look at the question of how the party should relate, if at all, to trade union organisation. It's something that a lot of us are discussing sort of between ourselves in different forums, but it's not something that the party has taken seriously. And I think it's a question that the party's bodies should be asking and should be reporting to the members on, because ultimately this is something that a Green Party conference and membership would have to determine and shape. So what this motion does is it would instruct the Green Party executive to begin a process of consulting with various bodies inside and out of the party, not least trade unions and trade unionists, and delivering a report on different options for ensuring that trade unionists' voices are essentially heard within the party structures. That's not to say that this motion anticipates any particular outcome. I think the important thing is that this work is started and that this report is delivered to a future Green Party conference. It's not for me or for any individual member to try and determine the outcome of that process from the start. But what this motion does do is it sets clear parameters for what members expect of the party's executive. And it ensures that members will have a chance in future to look at ways of working more closely with trade unions.
I mean, quite a lot of people aren't in trade unions anymore. I'm still clinging on to Unison just about, but for people who are perhaps not in a unionized workplace or younger people who've never joined a trade union and so on, what do you think is important the Green Party build stronger links with trade unions?
It's still the case, even in trade unions' sort of diminished state these days. They're smaller than they used to be, less powerful, far less powerful than they used to be. But it's still the case that they are the largest, most powerful working class, independent working class institutions in this country. They have the ability to intervene in the economy, not only to strengthen workers' rights and to ensure that we are all paid better, treated better, but indeed to help achieve our political objectives. And that's why it's so important that the Green Party is working closely with trade unions. And it's so important that the party sees its project as one that fundamentally involves trade union activity at its heart. The Green Party, if we ever achieve executive power in the bourgeois state, which is as a parliamentary party, is what we intend to do in the short term at least. If we do that, and if we seek to use the levers of power to achieve our ends, we're going to see serious determined opposition from those who currently enjoy political power and economic power in this country. And we need to be prepared to face that down. Now, some of the only organizations that are capable of cohering and organizing a mass of people to stand up against that and provide serious resistance are trade unions. After all, they operate at a sort of workplace level. They're able to intervene in the process of production on which capitalism fundamentally relies, and so they are particularly well placed to stand up for a Green Party program. Now, of course, not only do we need trade union support, but they need ours because fundamentally, in their current state, trade unions and sort of at a workers at the workplace level aren't organized enough, aren't numerous enough, aren't currently determined enough to provide that kind of force. But that's something we desperately need to build. The worst thing that could happen is for an ambitious Green Party government to come to power in an election, find itself powerless, and watch its own supporters become demoralized and fundamentally see our project rolled back. So I hope that sort of begins to answer what's fundamentally quite a big question.
Yeah, I think it does. I think one of the things that surprises a lot of people is kind of left-wing figures. You get it in perhaps the States with people like AOC or Bernie Sanders or whatever, getting into positions of authority and just then not getting anything done and having to make compromise after compromise after compromise. And it always seems to me that it's because they've got no muscle. They've got no, the only force, the only pressure on them is from the establishment. It's from big business. It's from arms dealers. It's from all that sort of, oil and gas and all these massive industries saying we're going to do this, that, and the other. And they've just got no strength to push back against that sort of thing. So I think yeah, you're right.
I think I
Um,
absolutely, sorry, I'm just going to say I absolutely agree. And I think we also need to be conscious of what that can do, what that process can do to our own movement as well. I think it would be terribly demoralizing to see that happen. And we need to know that when compromises are made, as they surely will be made, because any left-wing party that seeks power in the state is going to have to make those. We need to be clear that that there is a clear objective in sight, and those can't go on forever. And for that, we need that countervailing force, as you say.
I was in the Labour Party at one stage. One of the things I witnessed at London conference, I went to London conference, which is sort of weirdly pointless exercise, but we voted on things, and there was I was the delegate for Enfield North, and I'd kind of we'd go and vote for stuff, and there was like three blokes in the room who represented trade unions, and they decided every single vote between them because they had kind of big block vote, and there's like hundreds of people in the room, and basically they represented so many people in their trade unions that they between the three of them decided every vote. Um, and I think a lot of people, myself included, being a trade unionist, and my parents were both trade union reps. My dad was a CWU rep, and my mum was an NUT rep. So I come from a kind of line of I'm a massive trade unionist. But one thing that I like about the Green Party is the kind of one member, one vote
Mm.
system where we don't have delegates, we don't have people who are empowered to represent other people, and everyone is kind of making their own case as an individual. And I think it avoids kind of backroom deals, and it avoids some kind of, uneven kind of power in a lot of ways. Um, if we want trade unions to back the Green Party and they're getting that kind of influence in the Labour Party, how do we attract them?
The key thing is that we do have to start from our principles as Greens. My sort of personal story is a bit different because I've always, well, not always, but I've never been in another political party, and I joined the Greens when I was 18. So I've sort of not had that kind of political experience. But I think it's really important that we sort of preserve that, sort of fundamental sort of democratic spirit. And substance to our party's operations, and so I would not at all favour any kind of sort of block vote exercise by trade union bureaucrats, because I think what the process you're describing within the Labour Party also reflects is a bureaucratisation of our trade unions as well. The fact that fundamentally a small selection of officers, many of whom are elected in elections with very low turnout, or that's if they're elected at all. Some of them might not be elected; they might be paid officials appointed instead. Um, and I think it's their unaccountability to trade union members as well, which enables them to essentially treat those kinds of votes as a sort of horse trading exercise as well. They're able to say, oh, well, if you give us this or that and the other, then we can tell our members that's a success, and in return we'll wave through this, that, and the other that you want. And that's what we want, I think, to avoid at all costs. What I would say is that I think beyond the model of the Labour Party, there is a whole world out there of different options for ways that trade unions and trade unionists could be empowered and given a voice within our party. And that doesn't necessarily mean empowering general secretaries or political officers to call the shots within our party organisation. It could involve, for instance, giving rank and file trade unionists a way of having the voice within the party structures. And we might think of different ways to enable that. But that's where I come back to the real point of this motion, which is not fundamentally to sort of come up with the answers and deliver them on a plate to Green Party members, but to begin a process through which we can really think about how we can achieve these things in line with our own democratic principles and commitments. I'm aware you asked another question in there as well, which was about sort of how do we attract trade unions without sort of offering them that kind of like block vote. And I would fundamentally say that the way we have to reach trade unions and trade unionists is not by sort of offering that kind of like quid pro quo, because as we've just said, I don't think it's acceptable. To our party, it shouldn't be. I think we need to sort of approach this by living by our principles, by engaging directly with trade unions, and by showing ourselves to be reliable partners of trade unionists in struggle. There will be certain trade union bureaucrats who doubtless sort of won't sort of see that as a particularly attractive offer, but fundamentally it's not them that I'm interested in bringing on board. It's the thousands of rank and file trade unionists, it's the gold star reps, it's the most advanced politically members of our class who I want on board. And so that it's those people I'd be looking to be seeing whether this working is working. Are they joining us? Are their voices being heard? Are they being selected as Green Party candidates, etc.?
How can trade union work be incorporated into the work the Green Party does on the ground?
There's a sort of whole world of possibilities, but I think we're already starting to see some incredible signs. I'd point in particular to the work that the Green Party Trade Union Group's chair, Roxanne Mashari, has been doing in Birmingham to support Green Party councillors, but also ensure that, critically that Unite members in waste collection services are heard and that the Green Party group is vocal in support of that struggle. There are so many other good examples of Green Party councillors and campaigners, using their positions to struggle alongside trade unionists, whether it's people working alongside IWGB delivery riders in Hackney or or waste collection services in Birmingham. There are lots of examples you can reach to, and I think the how that sort of exactly appears will depend on where you are and essentially the struggle around you. I think the key thing is that people are empowered, are resourced, and are trained to engage in this work. And I think that's what's missing at the moment. A lot of Green Party activists, I think, want this to be a big part of the party's offering. They want us to be engaging with Trains councils, to be standing in solidarity with workers on strike on the picket line, but may not feel like they've got the capacity to do so, may feel like they're not being resourced to do so. And so I think it's for the party centrally to provide that resource to local activists.
So, if members like the sound of all this, how can they support these motions?
So I think the critical thing now is to follow, like watch this space. I think the most important thing you can do is to join the Green Party Trade Union Group. If you haven't already done that, you should be in it anyway. And we welcome all Green Party members to come and join in. Critically, coming up, there will be a vote to prioritise motions. That is to decide which motions we want to be heard and in what order at Green Party conference. And there are so many great options out there. There are going to be so many motions that you like that you want to have heard. I would ask that if you can find room in your list, please do consider prioritising these two motions, A94, A96. Have I got those numbers right? I'm always petrified that I haven't. I have. But yeah, if you could please rank them highly in your prioritization ballot, that will increase the chances that these motions get heard and get voted on and get passed at Green Party conference.
Matthew, thanks very much.
Thanks very much for having me, Ed. Thanks, everyone.